Hello and welcome to a video covering everything that you need to know for how to center clay on the wheel. First things first, you want to think about how much clay you're going to be using in order to make your project of choice. Considering weight is really important if you're going for consistency and trying to make a similar thing over and over again. 1 to 2 pounds would be good for a mug, 2 to 3 pounds for a bowl, and 3+ pounds can get you a vase or a platter. Now obviously there is some variance here depending on if you want to make a fruit bowl versus a cereal bowl, but in general this is a good rule of thumb to follow. If you look at this, you can also see the good starting shape for your clay when you are going to start working on the wheel. That gumdrop shape that you see there is perfect for having a little bit more of an easy time as you start your centering process. First things first, I want to get any dried clay off of my wheel bat, and then also be sure to dry it slightly so that there isn't any standing water on my wheel. You'll see me hit the clay down onto the wheel in order to get it to stick on, and then I'm also going to be doing some slap centering, where I hit the clay to make sure that it is stuck onto the wheel bat, as well as adding a seal with my finger. All of these steps are just to really make sure that it's stuck on there well. We're going to be putting quite a bit of pressure on our clay, and we don't want it to come up and off of the wheel bat. As we are starting to center, I want to think about my hand position as I'm coning up. I prefer for my hands to be at a 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock position, creating a parallel line between the two of them as I squeeze. This is going to cone the clay up in between my hands nice and evenly, and also allow me to move against the spin slightly if I want to center a larger piece of clay, or if the clay is a little bit firmer and is harder to center in general. You'll also notice that I start to move my hands up the mound as I go to thin out or make the top smaller, while leaving the bottom wider. This is also a really good way to make the mound of clay thinner if you're trying to make a tall cylinder, or wider for something like a bowl. After I remove some of that extra clay, I'm going to start with my coning down process. And this is all with my left hand. I'm going to compress on the shoulder of the clay back down to that starting position. Please refer to the small image on the bottom right hand side to see where my hand placement is and how I compress in order to get it back to this shape. From here, we just have a repetition of technique. We're going to squeeze at 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock, moving our hands up the mound to create a cone before pushing back down on the shoulder of the clay with our left hands to get it back down to a consistent shape. I'm also sure to sponge up any extra clay that's on my wheel bat. I don't have a splash guard, so preventing some of those drips from hitting me is always a good thing. Here I'm going to do a center check by running my finger down the side of the clay wall to see if it is centered. If it isn't centered, your finger will bump out as you do that, and that's how you know you need to go back. Next, I'm going to start the opening process by sticking my thumbs down into the center of the clay. This is a time when you'll need to add a little bit more water to your fingers in order to ensure a smooth opening of the mound. After I reach the depth with my thumbs that I want, I'll go back in with my fingers in order to go down deeper and get the floor of my eventual pot to the desired depth. This is also when you compress the floor of your pot to prevent S-cracks, just by running your finger over it a few times. I like to leave a little bit of extra clay so that I can add a dramatic foot. However, you may choose to not include a foot at all and just have a pot that is cut off at the bottom, in which case you would want to make your floor a little bit thinner. Before I do my pull, I'm going to add water just with a sponge so that I don't put on too much, and then with my outside knuckle lower than my inside hand, I'm going to squeeze in slightly and pull up the wall. My hand position is at about 4 o'clock, and I'm going to pull with consistent pressure. I'm also going to go back and compress my rim by squeezing on both sides of it and pushing down with my pointer finger before going in for another pull. I will repeat this process until the clay is at the desired thinness that I am going for. I prefer to carve my pots after I've completed their throwing process, so I will probably keep this one a little bit thicker in order to facilitate that post-throwing decoration. Just like how I left a little bit of clay so that I could make a unique foot after this is done being thrown and has a little bit of time to dry. Generally, I will compress the rim after every pull, and as I'm pulling, I'm going to be squeezing with both of my fingers and moving up the clay wall a little bit slower than the wheel is spinning. If you go too fast, you'll end up with a spiral and an uneven rim, so you want to make sure that you're not moving your hands too quickly as you throw. Here you'll notice that I go in and remove a little bit of the extra clay that's at the base of my bowl, and that is just to help with pulling and getting some of the clay from down at the base where it's thicker up into the walls so that I can distribute it evenly. And next I'm going to do one more pull. You'll notice as I do this pull that I am pulling out rather than straight up because I'm making a bowl form. If you are throwing a bowl, you're going to want to pull out on a diagonal rather than pulling straight up like you are making a cylinder. So that is going to help make that funnel shape that I'm looking for when I'm making a bowl. And then later on, I'm going to use ribs to help finalize that curve that I'm looking for. I'm going to do one more slow pull to erase some of my pulling lines that I might have on here and to further expand on the width of the bowl and make sure that I have my rim at the placement that I want it at so that this form is nice and open and ready to be shaped with ribs. My next step is going to be doing some shaping with a bowl throwing rib. This is a rib that is rounded on both sides, and I'm going to be compressing and pushing out with the curved edge from the inside of the bowl. If you pay attention to the opposite profile of the pot away from my hands, you'll see that the shape of the bowl starts to become more rounded as I go over my final piece with the rib. One of my final steps is always to go back and touch up the rim one last time. The rim holds up the weight and the curve of your bowl, so it's really important to make sure that it's nice and strong And also you want to make sure that it has a rounded edge so that it doesn't become sharp after it's been glazed. I hope that you have found this video beneficial to you when it comes to centering, opening, and throwing on the pottery wheel. Here are some final images of my bowl before I decided to cut it in half in order to look at how I did with the throwing process. This is beneficial if you're trying to figure out where you leave clay, if certain parts are too thick or too thin, and certain areas that you could improve upon in order to maximize your clay usage. This is something that I always recommend to potters that are just starting out because it's more beneficial to you to learn from your pot by looking at it in this way than to hold on to it when you can just as easily make something even better next time. So, with all of that being said, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with working on the wheel. Let's get to it.